Here we are at Pinch Pots. This is a significant amount of clay. I think I said 4 to 6 inches tall. It depends on what you want your cup to be, to do. Is your cup going to be a big coffee cup? What are you going to do with it? This is a fair amount of clay. I probably only need about half of this much clay to do a 1/4 inch wall on a 6 inch, 4 inch to 6 inch piece. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this block into a little sphere. And there's a couple of different ways of doing this. I can slowly press my thumb in and work around all the way till I get to the bottom. Or some people like to just press all the way straight into the bottom. Now what that does is that'll tend to give you a little bit more of a tall cylinder than a bowl shape. But it just depends on how you like to work. So I'll slowly work my way down in both thumbs, using my fingers to support and move around the piece. I'm constantly moving and putting very little pressure. You can kind of see that, holding it awkward in order to make it so you can see this is going to be more wide because I'm trying to get both thumbs in. If I do one thumb, I can press all the way to the bottom, but my thumb is not symmetrical, and so I'm going to have naturally a little bit less accuracy, and I'm going to have to come in and pinch that out to get it proper, nice and symmetrical. Now you can change this and make it asymmetrical as you go. You can start it out knowing that you're going to make it asymmetrical, but the key is that I'm using the pressure of my thumb and my fingers, and I'm moving this around and around. I'm trying to add the same amount of pressure every time in multiple different places. That allows me to get a much more consistent form, and you can see it kind of just it's raising up. That's because I'm pressing at the bottom and I'm kind of forcing the clay up and out. So if I do kind of a spiral motion with my thumb, as I'm coming around, if I'm coming up a little bit, it'll push that clay up. Your fingertips are going to direct the clay as to where it should go. So I'm just moving around the piece slowly. You can see it taking shape. It's coming up. I still have a lot of weight in the bottom of this. You can see the interior space versus the exterior shape, right? That's about 1/2 inch of wall thickness, so I can come up significantly. Now, the taller I go with this, the more flimsy it gets, right? It's gonna be taller and thinner, and it may not wanna hold its shape, so you might wanna wait and let it get a little bit more stiff. I think I'm confident with this. I also have a fair amount of material down here in the base. And so I can try to lift that out, or I can carve that later. Some people have a really difficult time pinching that clay and forcing it up, right? So I'm pinching right at the foot of the clay, foot of the pot. And you can see as I did that, I'm now kind of defining a foot. So my foot's more narrow, but it's also thinner, right? Now all the thickness is right in here. So this is a little bit thinner and the thickness is in here. So I'll keep doing what I was doing before and kind of squeeze and lift as I go and force that clay up into the rim, into the body, making it taller, giving it a little bit more definition, creating a form that I'm interested in. Now it's all lumpy. We'll get there, we'll clean that up as we go. Now I'm gonna give this a bit more height right now by squeezing out all of these thick spots. You can see the rim is still about 1/2 inch, but I'm much taller now. So again, it's about repetition. It's about small movements, lots of small movements and just continue to move around the piece. And you can make just about any form like this. You're just slowly pressing it and giving it a place to be. You're telling it, I would like you over here, or I would like you over there. Now my movements are symmetrical, right? I'm going all the way around this, and I don't move up on the body of the piece until I've gone a full circle. And that allows me to have more control over the symmetry of this piece. So I'm starting to get there. Now, it does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect uniform. Some of the weight can be in the bottom. I can always trim some of that out later, and I'll show you that once we get to leather hard. We are doing a sgraffito design on this. So I do want you guys to consider leaving it thicker so that you have enough material to carve your design into when we get there. We don't want to necessarily go so thin that we can't have enough material to cut through into the clay to give us a nice heavy sgraffito texture. Now what I'm doing here is I'm kind of leveling out the rim. It's a little bit wavy and lumpy. If you like that, it's okay. You know, some people like that kind of funky, gives it a little bit more of a handmade feel. Now I guarantee you, no matter how meticulous you are, you're always gonna have a hand feel to this technique. You're never gonna have there's always gonna be some human element in it that allows it to have that aesthetic of handmade. So you don't have to add in this kind of funkiness. It's naturally there in the process that we're working with. So I can spend a fair amount of time working on that rim. I can also take and pull this clay in a vertical direction, right? So now I'm not pinching and dragging, I'm pulling my thumb kind of up the inside of my finger so that I'm giving it uniformity in the other direction, right? So that's giving it I've been doing this all the way around it. Now I'm pinching and dragging my finger up the surface of this in order to kind of give it that vertical uniformity and that vertical pinch that allows me to get it pretty consistent all the way around this piece, and that'll give me a better overall form. It also allows me to shape it differently. Okay, so you can see this form is roughly symmetrical. It's got a narrow base, it's got a wider rim. The rim's still got some thickness in it. It's got a little bit of room to breathe as far as shaping. I can still play with that a little bit. I can also carve some of that down, but I can address that later. One of the things I wanted to show you was that even though I have a narrow base, I can give more volume to that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically pull all the inside of this piece, and I'm gonna work all the way around, just basically stroking the clay upward, putting pressure outward and upward as I move around the piece. So what that's gonna do is give it a little bit of, it's gonna give it a little bit more body down in the base, giving it more volume. And I'm gonna do that slowly. I'm gonna move around the piece so that the profile of this piece will change as a result. Now, if this clay is too wet, it's really gonna start falling apart. It'll start to become more difficult to handle, but this is a way you can thin out your piece and use the existing clay that's down in there. If there's a thick spot, you can stretch that thickness out, giving you a much more volumetric form. Now my form, if I look at the side profile of it, instead of it being straight down, it's got a little bit of a volume to it. And so again, this is a slow, gradual process that I'm working all the way around, giving my piece a little bit more body as I go, trying to keep an eye on the overall symmetry of the piece, making sure that it's uniform all the way through. And now I've got a very different looking piece that actually has a lot more volume. And so that's one way to create more volume in the piece, giving it that much more ability to hold liquid if that's what you're after. I also kind of pulled some of that clay up into the top, so I could kind of come around the top part, squeezing this to make it more uniform again in the other direction, and giving myself a little bit more height. At this point, I could decide that I want a straight rim where I'm going straight up and down, or because I have a little bit more clay, I could start to flare this out. So now I'm pressing out as I'm squeezing. I'm using the contour of my thumb to create a lip, right? So now I really liked that other form. That would have been a great drinking vessel, but I'm gonna play around with it. And I'm showing you several different ways of getting to the same place. So now, again, a very different form with a very minimal change. Now I've got some wonkiness here. I can sit and I can address that. I can pull the clay down into those divots, or I could trim off the top when I'm done. I can use my loop tool to do that. I can also travel around the edge. I'm sliding my thumb so that I'm getting that contour. I'm getting that consistent thickness all the way across the top rim, and I'm flaring that out a little bit more. This again is going to thin out the clay, make it more uniform all the way through, which is going to give me a better piece in the long run, and it's going to make it a little bit more user-friendly. If I'm putting that cup to my lip, it's going to be a little bit more easy to drink out of if it's a thinner rim than if it's a thicker rim. Okay, here we're gonna address the rim now, right? So if I want a smooth rim, I can go around and kind of smooth out the surface of this rim. I don't want it lumpy physically. I want it roughly the same thickness the whole way through, and that can take a little bit of time. Once I get it to roughly the shape I want to smooth it out. I can take and just dip my fingers in a little bit of water. Like there's a couple of drops of water there, and put that water on the rim and just slowly kind of work it in and around the rim. Now that's going to smooth out the rim. It's going to make it a lot more user-friendly. All these little details make a difference. Now, normally I'd spend a little bit more time on a piece. I want to make this video as quickly as possible so that you're not sitting here watching too much, so that you have a chance to make and not be watching. I've also, kind of cut from one scene to the next, which helps cut out a lot of the time that if you were in the classroom, you'd be sitting watching me do the demo and waiting for things to dry. We want to try to speed up the process, so that's what I've done there. So I've kind of addressed that rim. At this point, if I wanted to add a handle or something to this, I would probably want to do it at the leather hard stage. I also want to wait to clean this up and make it a little bit more uniform. You can see the outside edges are pretty lumpy. As I rotate around this piece, I want to trim that with my loop tool, either my paracord loop tool or my smaller loop tool. I want to scrape that down. A lot of people use ribs for shaping. So what I was doing with my finger by bulbing out the inside of this, you can do that with a rubber rib or a wood rib. And then we also have a metal rib, which some people like to scrape down, and I'll show that in a second. Actually not, you'll see it in a second, but it'll be about a half an hour that I'm gonna let this sit out and go have lunch, and it's gonna dry the clay out a little bit to where it'll get to about leather hard. Once it's at leather hard, then I can kind of control it a little bit more. It'll hold shape, I can add a handle, and I can clean up this exterior. Once I've added the handle, which you're not required to do, but you may want to do, then I'll add the on-gobe and show the Sgraffito technique.